Let me introduce myself. Bruce Bell is my name. I sit in Australia operating through a lobby group called Real Justice. We're on the net. The address will be at the end of this video. What we have in Australia today, which most people do not even know about, is a massive bunch of corruption. We have courts, police in each state, and family service type departments that are majorly corrupt. The outworkings of this are horrendous. The damage to the community is astounding, not just in cost but in human misery and lives that are ruined because of what is happening. There are a huge number of families hurting because our family court system has been corrupt for a long time and it is getting rapidly worse. We are bringing a class action shortly which looks like it will have thousands of participants, and I'll tell you more about that shortly. We have a situation where children are being given to the wrong parents, they're taken into care, they're abused in care frequently, including sexual abuse, and some of them are murdered. I don't say things lightly. I come from a background of being a lobbyist on human rights issues and heading civil liberties groups going back 30 odd years. I have a law degree in recent years. I'm not acceptable to the powers that be, and I'll say this bluntly, although they won't like it, because I'm too honest. The problem most solicitors have is that they are intimidated by a network of corruption which threatens their very livelihoods. They look to lose their practicing certificates if they speak up. Now, of course, amongst them, like with the police, there's not everybody like that. There are some corrupt people, but they intimidate the rest. And we have a problem with people going along with this. We are drawing a line in the sand. This is going to stop. But you can help that. And you can help yourself through our class action, and you can help us. One recent case in point in this country, and I believe that the media attention has spread around the globe, is 4 girls aged between, I think, 9 and 15, who were living in Italy with their Australian mother, and 2 years ago, with the consent of the father, they came to Australia to live. Subsequently, he lied. He lied on oath in court documents and made out the children had been abducted. An affidavit from the person who witnessed him signing the passport applications for his 4 daughters says bluntly that he said in front of this mutual friend of both parents, although the parents were separated at the time, that he knew. He said, "I know they're going to stay." It wasn't they were abducted and not returned after an alleged holiday. So he's lied, he's been believed, and the evidence given to the court by the mother, which I have seen, and from a number of other witnesses, some of them independent witnesses, is very, very clear. Some of the things that were not given in the court evidence because the judge just simply decided not to take any notice of it or not accept it. And this was Justice Forrest in the Family Court of Australia, sitting at Brisbane. Although, in the last 12 years, the prerogative writs that were there to prevent corruption in the High Court, or writs that can be brought in the High Court to prevent corruption, have not been filed. That court has refused to file it. The Chief Justice of our highest court gets $500,000 a year in salary and presides over a court that is defying the clear mandate of our Constitution that is there to correct and prevent corruption. That is Section 75, for those of you that want to know. There's $100,000 a year has been wasted already on this court action, where the Australian government has been conned or prevailed on by parties we don't know to support this father from Italy who is pleading that his children have been abducted. The evidence from the multiple witnesses that hasn't made it to the High Court, and one has to believe that there's a reason why it hasn't got there, and I'll come to that in a moment, includes that this father has been compulsorily incarcerated in mental institutions several times in the last 5 years. In the time that the mother was living with him, there were other witnesses, a couple of family members there for a month, and their affidavits are very clear. He smashed her in the face with his fist in front of them. He's bashed his children's faces into the table at dinner if they uttered a mere murmur. They just sit there like stone statues waiting for dinner for anything up to half an hour until he decided to come into the room. This evidence was before the court, but Justice Forrest didn't read it. And then when we get to the High Court, we're dealing with, because of the lies of the father, actually perjury. There were lies on affidavit. They were perjurious lies. The government has spent all this money helping him. The mother cannot get legal aid. She's out of money. And part of the history is that whilst she was in Italy, the children in the middle of a very cold winter, went without electricity for a time because he's never paid any maintenance. But what's interesting is that in this recent few weeks, when this has been in front of the courts, he's been back to Italy a couple of times, flying first class. Now, those matters have never been looked at, but there are other issues that were in evidence before this court. The mother's affidavit was lengthy, and it covered an awful lot of grounds that I've just touched the top of. But this action in the High Court was on one esoteric or narrow issue about whether the Family Law Act was constitutional. What utter legal rubbish. The people putting that up are treasonous. They are betraying their client, and in fact they've been engaged in blackmail because the mother has been told that we're acting for you. Now, admittedly, they're free, but what they've blackmailed her with is, do what we say, which essentially is, don't tell anybody, suppress the media, or we'll drop you. And that's a terrifying prospect. But they have just run a narrow issue. The evidence I have seen covers about 8 issues, that any one of which would win the case, but they weren't pleaded. The only reason this case on a Section 75 of our Constitution writ got filed was because of the hoo-ha. There was a lot of media until the lawyers that are lackeys of the government get involved and suppress it. And that's what's happened. This woman's been blackmailed. Her children are now ordered to be returned to the father. The judge at first instance in the first court, that should have been reviewed or appealed properly, did not ask whether the children would be safe. He did not ask the children. Now, his responsibility under the international convention known as the Hague Convention sets it up that he has no capacity to make any order to deport a child without first being satisfied that it's safe to do so. He took no evidence, he rejected the mother's evidence, just ignored it, about the brutality, about the compulsory incarceration for mental illness, about the deprivation of liberty, about all sorts of things that were in evidence before him. He ignored that. He just said he had made a conclusion that none of this was a problem. He hasn't investigated. He doesn't actually, in international law, have the power to make the order, and these children are within days of being deported to live with a father who in the past has done the things I've just named and more. One wonders who his friends are. The mother can't get legal aid for 5 daughters, for herself and 4 daughters, and they're all Australian citizens. You wonder what is really going on. Now, as regards the Constitution being defied, we've got at least a dozen letters from the High Court over the last 10 years refusing to file a Section 75 of the Constitution writ. That is flagrantly contravention of the Constitution. It is defiance of our Constitution. They're taking fat salaries and not doing the job. We've actually got it to the point where we're not getting just refused by registrars anymore. We've had 2 judges of the High Court, Kiefel and Bell, in writing, refuse to file constitutional writs if there is a judge on the receiving end. They just won't file them. And nobody's doing anything about it because our politicians are nearly all asleep on the job and afraid to move. Now, we are starting a class action because in this country, for quite some years, thousands of children have been taken off families. In the state of New South Wales alone, there's 48,000 children in the so-called care of the department where they get brutalised substandard care and fed to pedophiles in some cases. There have been children die, and there have been many children taken off parents who have nothing wrong with them as parents. It is done corruptly in secret courts. The provisions that stop you speaking about cases apply in family law and in state courts posing as or functioning as children's courts. They do not allow public scrutiny, and in the last 800 years, in the evolution of British law, which we have inherited here, there is a very clear principle, and that is that courts must be open to the public to keep them honest. That hasn't happened with people who misguidedly have got through Parliament. Things like you can't cross-examine an allegation of domestic violence in the state of Victoria. You've got to have a lawyer or he can't cross-examine, but most of the lawyers are intimidated and some of them are clearly corrupt. They're certainly afraid to speak up. What has happened out of that is that a class action is underway, and there will be, I'll recite what happened actually. I suggested to a solicitor who is right up with this sort of thing in another state that there might be 3,000 cases because we can find 200 by breakfast time. And the comment back to me was very quiet and instantaneous. It said, oh, there'll be a lot more than that. Now in America, cases of this kind are bringing between $5 and $8 million per person, per parent, per child, per adult who used to be a child and got abused or taken off their family improperly. For these departments to take children, they have to prove there is a risk of harm, or they don't have the power in law to do it. And they're doing it to thousands of families. It is time we got angry. I stick my neck out a long way by putting this out to you. I've been victimised, our group has been victimised, Real Justice has had all sorts of attacks on it, and it'll probably get worse, but we're not going to do anything except take a stand. What's going to happen with this class action is that there are going to be an awful lot of damages claims in one group, and there is no risk for the people participating because most of them have run out of resources, they've run out of nervous reserve, they feel defeated, and let me tell you they're not, because in a class action we will arrange the funding and it will be insured so that even if we lose, you're not up for the legal costs. All you have to do is participate. Right now, make a noise so that these 4 beautiful girls, who after 2 years in Australia are top students in the middle of high school, the older two, absolutely top students, including in a language they didn't speak 2 years ago. Lovely girls being sent to hell in Italy because we have another family court judge who's doing it corruptly, and we have a high court full bench of 5 judges who are doing it corruptly and pretending that there's not a problem. There are thousands of families in Australia that know there is a problem, and I should add that in the UK and the USA, identical practices get thousands of children taken off parents, and in 18 states of America, there are children given out for adoption after the families have been forcibly taken out of their lives. I'd ask you, please, contact us to help or to participate or be a part of the class action that's coming up. Of course, donate. We work hard and don't have funding from anywhere. We will not take funding from places that will seek to control us. You can donate. The details will be on screen as I say this. Please take this seriously. We are aware that nearly all of the legal academics in Australia, of which there's approximately 2,000, don't know that the High Court is defying our Constitution and refusing to do what our first Prime Minister, a senior Queen's Counsel at the time when our Constitution was formed over 100 years ago, in the debate on the final day where it was decided to include this extra provision which makes our Constitution better than America's, where anybody with a grievance against a public servant of the Commonwealth Government can bring an action and have the matter reviewed. Nothing to do with appeals. It is reviewed and you've got a 100% guaranteed right to do it, but they're refusing to file it. But our first Prime Minister, Andrew Barton, said on that significant day that put our Australian Constitution ahead of the US one, he said, in answer to a question, this measure may not be strictly necessary, but it may prevent a great evil. Please help us. Help us to help these children. We are living in the great evil. We need to redress it. Make a noise to all of the politicians that you can find. Let the media know that people in this country and elsewhere are fed up with the corruption. Let's draw a line in the sand. You can help. We will do it. Thank you.